Beijing has slammed Washington for its latest comments on China's territorial brawl with Japan in the South China Sea, saying the U.S. should be more careful with its words and stay away from the region's matters. It is a reaction to statements made by U.S. Secretary of State Hilary Clinton, who reassured Tokyo of American support and warned China against any unilateral action in the dispute. Beijing and Tokyo both lay claims to a string of uninhabited islands that are said to be rich in natural resources. For more on this, we're joined now by George Koo. He is the founder and former managing director of International Strategic Alliances. Mr. Koo, thank you very much for being with us.
Morning.
On its very basic level, Hillary Clinton was simply supporting an ally. Why are they making such a big deal out of this?
Well, historically, there's no tenuous basis for Japan to lay claim to the ownership of these islands. And the U.S. played a huge complicit part in creating this debacle to begin with. After the World War II, the terms of unconditional surrender specifically excluded any of the offshore islands as being part of Japan, but somehow the terms of surrender were changed during the peace treaty written by in San Francisco. The Chinese had no part in the forming of that treaty, and then for whatever reason in the 71, 72 timeframe, the U.S. turn over, quote unquote, administrative control of the islands to Japan. And that was without any consent from China or Taiwan or the other parties concerned. So the U.S. created this mess, and I think the U.S. is continuing to prolong the problem that between Japan and China.
Now, does the U.S. even have a right to say anything? I mean, this is surely a regional matter. Now, to what extent can the U.S. try to pressure Beijing, and what kind of a reaction do they want?
Well, I think U.S. is, again, playing the strategic ambiguity game by, on the one hand, saying we're neutral about this and we're not taking sides between China and Japan. But on the other hand, they're saying, but we recognize that Japan has administrative control, and therefore we would be opposed to any unilateral action. But how did Japan get the administrative control? The U.S. turned it over to them. How did U.S. Originally get administrative control? It was because after World War II, U.S. had taken control of Okinawa, as well as the chain of islands, and including the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands. So from the beginning to the end, the U.S. was really responsible for this particular mess.
Now, the U.S., you say, is responsible, and President Obama has made it a clear objective to boost America's influence in the Asia-Pacific region, which is right on China's doorstep. Now, does he have the resources to compete with China and even India, for that matter?
Yeah. Well, I think the U.S. has this role of being the policeman around the world and spreading the military forces all around the world. Now, can they afford it? Well, that's a different question, because it seems like in order to meet their military budget, which is ever increasing, they're probably going to have to borrow the money, and most likely they'll be borrowing the money from the Chinese.
Now, Washington is already deeply involved in several conflicts abroad. You just mentioned this. But here they're squaring up against a nuclear power. Could this get really nasty, even possibly another Cold War?
Well, that's not the, I don't believe that's China's intention. I think China has been asking Japan to recognize and negotiate rather than ratcheting up the tension. Of course, Japan electing Abe is not going to help, because Abe is very well-known hawk in this particular situation. I think that the saddest part is that the Japanese people, most of the Japanese people, truly do not understand that they were the perpetrators of all the atrocious acts of World War II, and these are the residual. Instead, the Japanese government has been very successful in portraying Japan as the victim of World War II rather than the perpetrator of the being the aggressor. And the U.S., for its own strategic reason, viewed Japan as the preferred ally, and that's what's continuing to create this friction. But I'm not sure they're gonna. I think cooler heads will come and not go to war over these little specks of island. Certainly, China has never been the aggressor in terms of these disputes.
All right. Appreciate your thoughts on the subject. George Koo, founder and former managing director of International Strategic Alliances. Very complicated situation. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on the subject.
Yes, it is.